Good afternoon. Welcome in to the PowerMizzou.com live show or podcast as it may be, depending on how you're listening to it. I am Gabe DeArmond, publisher of PowerMizzou. The Missouri basketball postseason gets started right about 48 hours from now. We're going to talk about that on this episode. We're going to bring Drew King and Blake Lovell in here in just a minute. But before we do that, what we always like to remind you guys to do is to support the people that support us. That is James Carlton State Farm Insurance, carltoninsurance.net on the web, 314-961-4800 by phone. Look, y'all need insurance. I mean, if you don't have it, whatever, I'm not your dad, but you probably should go ahead and try to get it. And to do that, get in touch with James. He's going to give you the best deal he can give you on top of that. Not only your insurance needs, but if you call James or email James and tell him you need an insurance quote, if you get that quote from him, tell him you heard about it on PowerMizzou. He is going to donate $20 to the PowerMizzou Collective at Every True Tiger Foundation. That is our specific arm for Missouri's NIL Collective. It neared $100,000, or it neared $50,000 in the first 3 days. Our goal is $100,000. When that starts to happen, our subscribers get rewards in the form of private events, maybe even access to a practice, things like that. So you help Mizzou out, you help the site out, you even get something for yourself. So get in touch with James if your insurance costs a leg and an arm. James Carlton State Farm. And you guys have heard me talk enough. So what we're going to do is add a couple other people to this show. That would be on one side of your screen as I just randomly move the windows around. Drew King, you know him. And if you don't know the guy on the bottom, that is Blake Lovell, the managing editor at Southeastern 14. Is that the correct terminology, Blake?
That's the correct one, Gabe. But, you know, us being geniuses, of course, we decided to flip it on Twitter because the other one wasn't available. So some people call it 14 Southeastern. Some call it Southeastern 14. What does it matter, right? We got to change it to 16 soon anyway. So.
Right. Basically what they do, they cover every school in the SEC, every sport. Blake and good mutual friend Chris Lee, who also runs our Vanderbilt site. So check out their stuff. And Blake, before we get this going, I've got two important questions for you. Number one, are you officially, is it a paid position to be the chair of the Dennis Gates fan club, or is that just something that you've kind of adopted yourself and you do that on a volunteer basis?
Well, I mean, I think it's something like I get probably 2.3% of his paycheck, maybe. I think that's how it works.
Excellent.
I'm not sure if that's
a good commission.
I think that's the contract. So something like that, or maybe it's like 0.0002 or 3 or something. It's not a paid position yet, but that's what I'm reaching for, Gabe. I hope to one day be a paid staff member of the Dennis Gates fans club. So
whichever percentage that is, you might get in touch with Desiree Reed Francois, because sometime in the next 24 months your commission's going to go up, I think. Maybe sooner than that. Second question, so this initially came about because you have tweeted that you do have receipts from Missouri fans who were upset when Dennis Gates was hired. I invited you on to read those if you want to, and to not read them if you don't want to. So we just need to know, is this a mean tweet segment, or are you just going to talk about Mizzou in the SEC tournament?
You know, I think for the quality of the airtime, I feel like, I'd love to spend more time talking about Dennis, but yet, this is a situation where I can kind of sum up everything I got in about two sort of phrases. One was quite literally the phrase telling me to save the tweets that I put out about Dennis Gates. And so, again, I did that just because I was asked to. So I did save those. But the other one was just more about, this is the part, as you know, that really grinded my gears at the time, was more of the people pushing the let's go to Wikipedia and let's look at Dennis Gates' record. Even though I've never seen him coach a game before, let me tell you that I know exactly how good he is, because I'm just going to look at that first year at Cleveland State. And what do? You look at that, and what do you see, guys, right? It's, oh, man, this guy only won, are you kidding me, 11 games at Cleveland State? As if this program was starting at the foundation of Duke or North Carolina in the 90s.
Missouri won 12 last year, so,
That was the part, like, that was the thing I saw the most, I think, in the replies to me during that time frame was just, how are you vouching for a coach that went 11-21 in his first season in the Horizon League? I said, well, how are you well, I knew how you're coming up with it. You're basically looking at Wikipedia, and trying to sort of tell me, I guess, what you know about Cleveland State basketball, because as you guys know, I've said it many times, my work I do for the Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook, I was covering the Horizon League at the time, and that was, of course, one of the teams I had to do a story on, and I texted Dennis Gates. I want to say it was about 48 hours after he got the job, and I said, "Hey," I said, "Look, I know that I really need to do my story, and I know you don't have a roster, so I don't really know what you're going to tell me." But I basically said, "You just let me know when you feel like you can give me something on your roster, so I can send the story in and such." The guy gets back to me like 7 days later. I'm like, "What? Like, yeah, you can't be done yet. There's no way you're done." But he had basically put, and I'm watching this play out on Twitter, and I'm like, he just added 2 more players like in a span of an hour, and I'm like, he's just trying to get as many guys as he can, and I think that was it for me, was knowing that he took over, and I'm not exaggerating here, guys, when I say, and you guys probably know, like Cleveland State was probably at the time. I'm sorry, Cody. I know you've been asking on Twitter for this, but Cleveland State at the time, I honestly think was I'd say bottom 5 in terms of complete dumpster fire programs in college basketball because of what was left there for him. And I won't call out the former SEC head coach that left him that. But if you look on Wikipedia again, you can probably find it. But I mean, that is kind of what he was left, right? And to tell me that go from that in whatever it was, 2019, to them winning the Horizon League title less than 2 years later, and just seeing how he constructed the roster, that's why I kind of went so hard against the people who just used the record, just used the Horizon League, without doing any sort of homework or research on what Dennis Gates actually did from that starting point. So,
well, Blake, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the internet. It's way more fun to just be angry without knowing anything than it is to do research. Drew, go ahead, man.
Yeah, Blake, just curious. I feel like I know the answer, but if you had a vote, would you have given it to Dennis Gates for Coach of the Year?
I would have. I mean, I would have, and obviously there's some bias and contractual things involved there, but I mean, look, I don't know if you guys agree, but I looked at this and Gabe, you can maybe remember. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. These years run together, but I don't know that I remember a year recently, and I don't know what that time frame would be, I guess. But I think you had 4 strong candidates for the award. I think you could have looked at Gates, you could have looked at Oates, you could have looked at Buzz, you could have looked at Stackhouse, and I was not. I said I wouldn't be surprised any combination of those guys. If it's one guy, I said to Chris in the text, I was like, they're probably going to give it to a couple guys because I think it's hard to break that tie if you really think there's 4 guys. And remember, this is a coach's awards. So if you consider that there's 14 guys voting, there's probably going to be a tie somewhere just because there were 4 worthy candidates. And my guess is they all got to vote somewhere. So I think that's kind of one of those things where, I understand, like from a Missouri standpoint, you can be frustrated, but coaches awards can be tricky. And because I've always been of the opinion, I can't prove it, but I don't know that those coaches awards come from necessarily the head coach all the time. I think that's definitely something that can be passed down. So not saying there can be some bias in play on some of those, but I think there's absolutely, a case that can be made for all those guys. But I think, Gabe, you pointed out on Twitter, and this was kind of my method when I did this, breaking down those 4 guys. I think Gates started with the least amounts in terms of basically rebuilding the entire roster. Essentially, of course, Kobe Brown's there and Ronnie DeGray and those guys, but I just think it was kind of a complete restart in a sense. And not to say that Vanderbilt had a great roster. But I think if you looked at it and knew that you had Liam Robbins coming back healthy and those kind of things, and of course, I don't like penalizing the guys who have the talent and make it work like a native,
because that's part of the job,
right? Yeah. Exactly. And so I think, and for an example of that, I mean, it would be Cal over the years that some of his best teams well, Cal never won Coach of the Year award because it was like, well, he could just roll the ball out and they'd be fine. But like, that's not how it works. Like,
Right.
in a sense, he has a harder job because he was getting, the top 5 of the top 10 players, freshmen in the country, and trying to make everyone happy. But so I'm not, honestly, Drew, like it to me, it was just one of those things where I'm not shocked at all that he didn't get it, but he would have been my vote if, that was kind of the way we did it. So,
Yeah.
Want to invite you guys watching along. Feel free to comments, questions, whatever, put them in. We'll get to them, and I'm seeing them. And at some point, we'll ask Blake about this story that I don't know that he apparently is going to tell on this show, but or maybe he's not going to tell. But anyway, and look, let's get past the idea that Dennis Gates not winning this award is some sort of disrespect. Like, he has gotten tons of national respect. A few people just thought somebody else might have done a little bit better job, which is fair. But Dennis likes to remind us, and I don't hold it against him, he has earned this. He likes to remind us that none of us thought that they were going to be very good at the beginning of the year. I said the ceiling for this team was probably like 19, 20 wins. And if they were the right 19 or 20, they might be on the bubble and sneak on the right side and find themselves on Tuesday night in Dayton. Like, even being a big fan of Dennis Gates and thinking more highly of him than probably a lot of people did, like, did you see this as a 23-win NCAA tournament team doesn't have to play till Friday in Nashville?
No. And that's what I keep reminding people. They're like, oh, you got this right. I'm like, yeah, but let's not act like I thought this team would have no, I didn't think this team would have a double bye. Yeah, and that's the thing is I think in this era, again, as you guys know, I think it can always be hit or miss when you're basically, and it's not just Dennis Gates taking over a new program. It's for any coach that flips their roster every year. I think that there's always an element of uncertainty because you can look at all the pieces and say, wow, that guy's going to play great with that guy. And boy, they're going to fit together as the 2 and 3 in this rotation. But until you actually see them out there, I think it's really hard to know exactly what that's going to look like. And, I think that's just the nature of the game these days. And so when you started to see him look at the roster, let's be honest, and I know this has been brought up before, but what was the thing that excited people the most about this roster? There were 2 things for me. It was the return of Kobe Brown and seeing what he could do under Dennis Gates. And the second thing was Isaiah Mosley. Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times that when Chris and I did our shows in the preseason, I said, anytime we mention Missouri, it's like, yeah, but they've got Isaiah Mosley. And it's, that was the thought, was if they were going to, hit that point of really exceeding expectations, that was why they were going to do it, because they had a guy that was just such a dynamic scorer coming in. And that's why I think it's been, you talk about being impressed, like they did it, of course, without him playing, a lot this season. And I think to me, that's the biggest thing is when you look up and down the roster, once you started to see it come together, again, going back to like, I was sort of just flashing back to Cleveland State because I saw how he was putting the roster together there. And then when you saw them start winning, you're like, oh yeah, well, that's the reason he got Trago Million, is because they needed him to do that. That's why they got DeMoy Hodge, because they needed him to do that. And when you started to go down the roster, of course, he brought those 2 guys with him, but you're thinking, okay, well, that's why he got DeAndre Golston, because there are going to be times where they sort of need a spurt of offense.
Or a 40-foot bank shot.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to have
or a couple of them.
Yes, multiple. So, and that's like, you just started looking at that and you're like, okay, well, obviously there's a lot of upside with the younger guys that are coming in, the JUCO guys, like Nick Honor. Like, I don't know how many times everybody will tell you, like, I think this team without Nick Honor, it's still really good. But like, to me, he's that piece that holds it all together just because of the position he plays and just the experience and leadership. But no, I mean, long way to get to that answer, Gabe. Like, no, I didn't think they'd be 23-8.
Yeah.
Well, Blake, just to piggyback off of that, what do you think it is about Missouri that allowed them to kind of exceed expectations, even with Isaiah not playing as big of a role as everybody thought?
Well, we've had this discussion before, and honestly, I think one of the things that I look at with them is this is a league that is built on defense, and that's not a good thing sometimes because, I mean, let's be honest, guys. I'm looking ahead here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but like, I'm looking at the Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M part of the SEC tournament bracket, And I'm wondering how the SEC network is going to extend their programming like past midnight, knowing that's like the, Thursday night, that's your combination of games. I think there's going to be 3-hour games with those three teams. But I think it's because there are not a lot of great offensive teams in this league. And I think one of the reasons they've been able to capitalize, and they're obviously not the same as Alabama, because I think what people forget about Alabama is that they are an elite defensive team. Yes, there's a lot of flashiness offensively, but they are great on the defensive side. But it's because I think they were just able to score the ball more consistently than some other teams. I mean, again, you can pick apart flaws of a lot of teams on the offensive side in the SEC. There are not a lot of flaws outside of, I think, Missouri's just inconsistency on the road shooting, but who do we not say that about, right? Like, I mean, we can say that about everybody. And so I think just their ability to have those spurts where they can kind of outscore teams, because we know it's not necessarily coming on the defensive side. They're not going to, let's call it what it is. But that's okay, again, because in this league, you had a lot of teams that had to win grinded out games. I mean, I think perfect examples, some of those teams were Mississippi State and teams like that. And we can all say, well, we think Mississippi State's better than 8-10 in the conference, but that's what they finished. They finished 8-10. And, so I think that to me was a big reason, is that they were just able to consistently make more shots than a lot of other teams. And look, they're efficient in all the areas offensively you need to be efficient in. And, there's not a lot of teams in the SEC that are like that. So when they win against some of those really good, grinded out defensive teams, if they could just find that gap somewhere, which I think the Tennessee game, which is kind of fitting, was the perfect example of that. If they can just get a hot shooting performance against a team like that is elite defensively, you can see what that can do for you. And I know they won on, again, like you said, just a heave at the buzzer, but it's still something where I think that allowed them to close the gap. And then games really didn't make shots, and it wasn't like their defense helped them out, and they got blown out a little bit. But I just think that was it. Was just they had a very defined sort of identity on offense, and they helped, the turnovers, forcing turnovers, that helped them get a lot of easy buckets too. And I just think that was probably the difference to kind of eclipse some of these other teams.
Again, we're talking with Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14. If you guys follow SEC basketball, I hope you're following Blake and Chris and everything they're doing over there. You probably know who he is, but if not, that's who he is. He covers SEC, everything in the SEC, but basketball is obviously what we're concerned with now. So we could spend, we don't want to keep you all day, but you mentioned Mizzou, Tennessee. So that is, like, I don't know what the most amazing thing about this season was that Missouri scored 86 on Tennessee when nobody else scored basically 60, or that Missouri gave up 85 to Tennessee, which is a team that is just flat out incapable of scoring, which is why I don't really like them in March. So this game Friday night is, it's fascinating to me with no Zakai Ziegler, semi-neutral court. It's in Nashville, but I don't know that Tennessee fans are necessarily, like, Kentucky fans are buying all the tickets anyway. We're assuming that's going to be the matchup. If Missouri gets Ole Miss or South Carolina, then we know they're playing Bama probably on Saturday. Yeah. But, like, just big picture, I could see Missouri getting beat by Tennessee. I don't think it hurts them if they do. I could also see Missouri playing on Sunday. Like, and I could find 7 teams that could win this tournament. Just big picture, what do you think going into this thing?
Yeah, here's how I've labeled Tennessee. And the thing is, I could put this label on a lot of teams. Like, I think Tennessee is like the wild card. I could see Tennessee, losing to Missouri just because they can't get sustained offense. I could also see Tennessee putting in, 4 great defensive performances, and they win every game 60-58 and win the tournament. It's like, I think that's where Tennessee's at right now. But the problem is not having confidence in a team that's probably going to be a 3 or 4 seed. That's not good, because, that's just not ideal. And unfortunately, again, that's been the theme for Tennessee, is even when they're in these spots, when they get to March, it can be hard to trust them based on the matchup. So, yeah, I think without Ziegler, and again, you guys know, I said in my individual awards, I would have voted Ziegler as the best defensive player in the SEC this year. But I can also understand if you say, well, he was paired with Vescovy and as a combination. Maybe one guy doesn't stand out, but it's like, if you're telling me to pick one guy I just do not want to try to score against, if I'm a perimeter player, I'm probably picking Zakai Ziegler, maybe Vescovi. Of course, I would put Demoy Hodge in there too, although I know I got some flack with this, with the memes, but I do love the memes, guys. I appreciate it. But I could not necessarily put him ahead of the two Tennessee guys and maybe even a Colin Castleton. But I think it's just one of those things where, I mean, let's think too with Tennessee. They have not been fully healthy the entire season. And it's interesting because I don't, hopefully I didn't jinx them, because as soon as they got everybody back, I said, finally you see the Tennessee team all together, and then Ziegler gets hurt. And now it's like, of course, James has missed games, Phillips has missed games, Keys missed games. So like, I also wonder if like the chemistry, because I don't know how many games all of these guys have played together. And now when you take their point guard out of the mix, again, we just talked about Hodge, right? You're going up against a Tennessee team that's without their point guard. Of course, Vescovi is fine, and he can kind of lead the way if he needs to. But I still think that puts some pressure on Tennessee in a matchup against a team like Missouri, who forces as many turnovers as they do. And because of what you said, Gabe, it's like you have a team that, look what they did the first time against Tennessee. And if they're coming out and hitting shots, do I trust Tennessee? I mean, they did in that game, but do I trust Tennessee to play catch up against a lot of teams? I really don't. And so I think that's the biggest key to this matchup, is to sort of see, early on, is Missouri hitting shots? If they are, again, hitting threes and being able just to, I think, just force those turnovers against a Tennessee team that can be susceptible there. I would not be surprised at all. Like I said, if Missouri beats Tennessee in this game and even has a chance, like you said, to get to Sunday, I also wouldn't be surprised if we see the good Tennessee and they are the ones getting, there on Sunday. It's just, I don't know what you're going to get. And that's why I think it's just such a wild kind of setup, really, for Tennessee right now.
Yeah, Blake, if you're Missouri, would you rather see Ole Miss or South Carolina on Friday?
Yes.
Any of the above. I tell you, here's what's interesting about South Carolina. You guys know this. Like, South Carolina had, I don't know what the fan support looks like in Columbia at those games. I know it looked great for that Alabama game, but they get a rise out of not playing at home for some reason. Like they go on the road and hey, they're ready to go. But I mean, I think honestly, you'd probably rather see. Well, South Carolina's a good offensive rebounding team, aren't they? I know, right?
Everybody is a good offensive rebounding team against Missouri.
That's my worry. I was like, maybe, but no, they're both good offensive rebounding teams. I think I'd probably rather see South Carolina, in all honesty. I think Ole Miss, we saw that last game. I hate to say this because I don't want anybody to like run with this and be like, this guy just said that a 3-15 team in the SEC is underrated. But I think when you look at how their games unfolded this season, like Ole Miss played some close games. They just didn't have that next sort of gear offensively to get beyond, winning some of these games that they lost by 5 points or less. And when you really look at it, they had quite a few of those in the SEC. And so I think they're kind of a team with Brakefield, who I think is underrated. Miles Burns, I think, is underrated. Those kind of guys. I don't know that I'd love that matchup, because what does Ole Miss have to lose? And I wonder what the motivation is for Ole Miss, knowing that they're probably about to get their new head coach.
The motivation is every game they win is 24 more hours they delay hiring Chris Beard.
So that's the thing, is like, you're either trying to win because you want to impress your new coach and, maybe a forced transfer is not going to be there or something. But, it's one of those things where I don't know what the motivation is of either team. So I'd probably rather see South Carolina, but I don't know that, again, neither, I believe, on a neutral court in that setting should beat Missouri. But stranger things have happened. So.
All right, we'll wrap up real quick with you with one more from each of us. I look at the SEC and think they've got a chance to get 8 teams in. Mississippi State, might. I think definitely needs to beat Florida. If they beat Bama, they're definitely in. But they've got 8 teams that could get in. I could easily see 7 of them losing the first weekend. I mean, it's Alabama won't lose the first weekend. Every other team could honestly lose in the first round or make a Sweet 16. Missouri fans have raged against we have now gone from humans hate Missouri to computers somehow hate Missouri. If you are, I mean, I think Missouri is going to be like a case study for the next couple of years for what the committee values, because I can argue they should be a 5. I also could see them being like a 9. I mean, if you're in that room and they hand you that sheet, where do you put Missouri? Like, what's the number on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I'm higher on them because I think, and you said exactly what I put responding to a couple people on Twitter. I said I think Missouri is going to be the ultimate what will the committee value this year team. When you see where Missouri, let's say Missouri comes out in the very first bracket, like whatever region that is. Let's say they're up there as the 8 or something, or let's say they're the 7 or whatever. Maybe they're the 9 or 10. Who knows?
Right.
Then you will know exactly what the rest of the bracket's going to look like because you will know what they valued depending on where Missouri is at. I honestly believe that. If they're a 7, you'll completely understand, well, here's what the committee valued. They valued the fact they had no bad losses. They got good quality wins. And, hey, they may have lost some games against good competition, but we're not going to knock you for that because you didn't have any bad losses. And, okay, that's one scenario. If they're a 10 or something, well, for some reason this year, we just really leaned into the predictive metrics and the advanced numbers, and we looked at their non-conference and all that. Like, that's going to be the spill you hear this year. So if it were me, I think the fact is they are one of, you guys probably have the number, one of how many teams that have no quad 2, 3, or 4 losses? What is it, like 6?
At one point, there were 6 teams that had like 5 quad 1 wins and no losses below quad 1. That may have changed. But.
So something like that. But the fact is they are one of a select group of teams that has no bad losses. And so I think for that reason, when you consider that, then you get into the, they only beat Southern Indiana by 6 and they only beat some of these teams. And I'm just like, hey, they're 23-8. What the problem for Missouri, probably one of the things is when they decided to lose, boy, they decided to lose in some ways, right? It's like, Kansas, they really lost that one. Auburn, boy, they really lost that one. I think even the Alabama game, you can, because they didn't have Kobe Brown.
Even A&M,
even A&M. That's another one. So it's like, should that really be, one of those things? It's like, if you look on the flip side, and that was a different argument, but if you look at Vanderbilt, right? Vanderbilt comes off a 57-point loss to Alabama, and what have they done since then, right? They've won 8 of 9, 9 of 10, whatever it is. So it's, margin of victory, all that stuff, I know will be factored in, not necessarily in all the computers, but I would put Missouri right now, and I think Chris and I, when we did like our bracketology, which he's way better at this than I am, I said, look, I think Missouri's probably a 7 right now. And I said, I think there's definitely a scenario where they're higher than people think, but I also think, let's say they lose to Tennessee. What does that really do to you? Because you're losing to a Tennessee team that who at this point could probably lose by 40 every game the rest of the way and still be number 3 in the net. Honestly, has Tennessee moved at all this season outside of 2 or 3? Like, they've been there all year. And so I think if you look at it that way, I don't know why a loss to Tennessee should hurt. And also, what does the committee value in the SEC tournament? Because last year it didn't look like they valued
nothing.
All that much. Nothing. So
getting it done.
Right. So I don't know if it matters what you do. If you're Missouri, their seed may already be set, but I would put them at a 7. I would put them on the higher range of where people have them right now.
Blake, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but if Missouri ends up going on a big run in the tournament, what do you think some of the reasons will be? And then if they get knocked out early, what do you think some of the reasons will be?
Yeah, when I start to look at teams like in matching them up and all that, I'll start with the bad first. I think it's very clear to me they want to avoid teams like a Mississippi State, where you have a very aggressive, physical type team that can rebound, that can really hurt you on the offensive glass. I know a lot of teams in the SEC are like that, but I think we have to remember too, one of the reasons why a lot of SEC teams are so good offensive rebounding is, well, there's a lot of, good athletes and a lot of size, but it's also the fact that a lot of SEC teams can't not shoot.
They miss a lot of shots.
Yeah. They miss a ton of shots. And I think you have to remember that too. So I think matchup, it really matters there. Can that sort of alleviate itself a little bit? But I would not want to play teams like that. Would not want to play a team like A&M, whose sole purpose is to, put you into submission, basically, just with the way they play. We are going to just, physical. We're going to get bumped on every play. Those are the kind of teams I just don't think Missouri will fare well against because of what they need to do offensively. Now, on the flip side, and also maybe not not a great slice and dice offensive team either, because I don't know that the help rotations and all those things are what you necessarily want to be putting them in right now. But on the flip side of that, we talked about earlier, one of the things I really like to look at is, and this is why I'm against some of the teams in the SEC and why I really worry about them, what Gabe said, that I could see them knocked out very quickly. But it goes back to kind of my first point of the conversation is they are so reliable, I think, when you look at just some of the, if you're trying to find something like the offensive numbers, and I know it's been a little hit or miss when they're not at home, but if you just look at the numbers, like I feel like they have enough guys who can score to where, look, again, somebody maybe is able to defend Kobe Brown in a different way, and he's not making shots, but you do trust that maybe a DeAndre Golson's going to step up. A Hodge we know can hit threes. I think they've got a lot of different ways they can score, and one of the ways is not even just looking at an individual player; it's looking at forcing the steal, getting 2 easy layups in a span of a minute, and that's easy points. So I think because they're not just a bad offensive team, like again, let's take Mississippi State. I hate I'm picking on Mississippi State here, but they're the worst 3-point shooting team in the country and one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the country. Like, how can you possibly expect me to trust a team like that, even though they're one of the best defensive teams out there? So they've got to have the perfect matchup, I think, to be able to advance in a tournament setting. Meanwhile, for Missouri, you can also probably say that just based on the struggles defensively and rebounding, but I think their offensive ability and their ability just to get out and go, force some turnovers, I feel like some teams don't want to play that way. And they have a style that just some teams do not want to play, and they will frustrate you. They'll bug you just by how they play defense. And, it's not always going to be perfect, but if they get a steal out of it, then who cares? And they do that a lot, right? So I think it's just their ability to put sustained offense together, which is unlike a lot of other SEC teams, like we said earlier. I think that's what can get them beyond the first weekend of the tournament. And again, this is all matchup based. You definitely want to avoid the 8-9 game, because I think when you look at how they match up against the 1 seeds, I can't say I love any of those matchups just based on, and we know it's not going to be Alabama, right? But Houston, I don't love that. Purdue, no, like I don't love that one either. I mean, look, and
Zachy,
that's because
would get 50.
Yeah, that's my problem there is like, think about rebounding and defending. I just don't know that I love that matchup. So I think 7-10, not saying the 2 seeds are, perfect or vulnerable in every way, but I think that's certainly where you'd probably be okay if you get underseeded as the 10 versus just staying away from the 8-9. I think that's the best case scenario, is to look at that, because like I said, I feel like matchup wise, if you want to pick the things that Missouri can do well to take them beyond the first weekend, I think there are some teams possibly on that 2 seed line they can do that against. I don't know that the 1 seed line looks that great right now against them.
Well, yeah, and you just described to me the difference between this Missouri team. Like Konzo Martin went to 2 tournaments in 4 years. He wasn't awful here, but every game you watched and said, well, his goal is to win 60-58.
Right.
And when your goal is to win 60-58, you have no margin for error.
Yes.
There are nights that this Missouri team takes the floor where they do everything poorly and it doesn't matter because they make 16 3-pointers, and you just have a bigger margin for error when you've got 140 possessions a game or whatever it is. So I know you've got another thing to do at 3:30. So we want to get you out of here. I'll be honest, I don't know what I'm getting into here. I've had 7 people tell me I have to ask you about the Muss Nuts story. This sounds dangerous, especially given that I know Eric Musselman's penchant for just randomly taking clothes off. So,
all right. Well, let's start by saying he left his clothes on. Okay. That's the
news.
best way to start this whole discussion. So this has all come about because I guess we did one of our live streams the other night, and somebody said, well, Blake, isn't this, you get to reunite with Dennis in person. And I said, the last, and they started this hashtag too. I'm like, if you guys get this trending, Eric Musselman's probably going to call me and be like, what have you done? Like, this is ridiculous. I don't want any part of this. But it all started because they're like, you're going to reunite. I said, the last time I think Dennis and I were in the same building was the year that you just said it, Gabe. Missouri played Florida State in the tournament in Nashville. Like, that was the last time I remember probably being in the same gym as Dennis Gates, because he was still the assistant at Florida State at the time. And But who else played that year in Nashville in the same sort of setting? That was the Nevada Wolfpack, coached
right.
by
Yep.
none other than Eric Musselman. And what did they do in those two
Did they
games they
beat?
played?
Was that when they beat Texas?
2 huge comebacks. They beat Cincinnati and they beat Texas to get to the Sweet 16. They came back from like 15 down both times to do it. I think the Texas game was the 7-10 game, I believe.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was the 2. I think Cincinnati played Georgia State. And so the dramatic comeback against Cincinnati gets him to the Sweet 16. So Eric Musselman's first movement is he's excited. We know, pretty animated guy. I think we would all agree with that. He's not shy about that. So he runs over. Everybody's celebrating because we happen to be sitting on like the left side of the press row. And so all the Nevada fans, that's the section behind us. So that's all their tickets. So he runs over and everybody's celebrating. And all of a sudden, I have turned this way. And I look back around and I see Eric Musselman like coming this way. And he is now on the table right in front of me. Like he is, I mean, he has jumped up on the media table. Now, everyone I think had kind of scurried. I was just sitting there and somebody else was beside me. But so my laptop is my first thought, right? I got to get I don't want my laptop to get broke. But then I look up and I'm face to face. And that's how
but
nuts,
not face. Yeah.
That's how the must nuts came to be. It's sort of, I mean, that's how I tell it. I said, sort of come face to face with the must nuts. And that's what happened. So,
Right.
you live and you learn. You try to stay out of those situations if you can, but sometimes the head coach is going to run up and jump on your table and his nuts may be right there. So
I was in the building that night, but I think I was getting ready to cover the Missouri-Florida State game, so I wasn't out there. I have seen Marshall Henderson jump on that table, though. I was there for that. So.
Yes, I think I'm just so unexpected. But again, I should have known because I knew the Nevada section was behind us, and I was like, if they win this game, all the players would come running over, and yeah, so that was, and I've told him that story before when I've had him on like podcasts and stuff, and he probably doesn't remember it, but trust me, I remember it. You don't forget that. So there you go.
All right. So real quick before you go, Blake, just let everybody know, like if they want to find you guys do a lot of stuff, SEC wide, daily. Where can they find you? Where can they follow all the stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Just like you on YouTube, you can search for Southeastern 14. You can find all of our daily stuff. Obviously, a lot of basketball with Chris and I going up these days. We're getting ready to do a live show here in Nashville here in the next couple of hours. So you can find that there. And also baseball, which I know Missouri trending in the right direction early here. We got a lot of coverage on that. Football as well. So you can find it out there. Just search for Southeastern 14 on YouTube. And everything else, you can just follow me on Twitter at the Blake Lovell.
Perfect. Appreciate it, man. And Drew, we'll see you in Nashville. I will watch you on YouTube.
Perfect. Yeah, no, Drew, come say hello if I don't see you.
Definitely
look
will.
forward to it.
For
see you guys. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. That is Blake Lovell joining us. Again, Southeastern 14, he's the managing editor. Him and Chris Lee do a lot of stuff there. And like we joke, he was the first person I saw say, hey, Missouri fans, shut up. You got a hell of a coach, right? And, and he's proven right so far. So, Drew, you're headed to Nashville tomorrow.
Correct.
What's a good weekend for Missouri here?
A good weekend from Missouri. Well, I think you pointed out that they haven't played on Saturday or Sunday before in the SEC tournament ever. So I think just a win in that quarterfinal round would be fantastic for Missouri, just as a program to make it that far. So I think that a win over Tennessee or whether it is Ole Miss or South Carolina, that's kind of just the first step. You will probably run into Alabama after that. And if you can hang tough with them and not get blown out by 35 points like they did last time, I think you're in pretty good shape.
Well, and the beauty of this tournament from Missouri's perspective, and Blake talked about it, nothing can hurt them.
Yeah.
Whatever they're seeded today, they can lose by 25 on Friday night. And I think that's still what they're going to be seeded. I think they can help themselves simply because they've got the possibility of as many as 3 quad 1 games in front of them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they can hurt themselves at all. So
correct. And I think that's why it was so important to get the double bye too, because then you
don't have that South Carolina game.
Exactly. So they're definitely there's not a whole lot of risk in this tournament, and there's a whole lot of upside for sure. The biggest question is just how much is the selection committee going to value some of these games?
Right. And we will obviously find that out on or maybe we won't find it out on Sunday night, honestly. It might be kind of tough to tell, but we are 90, so right about 100 hours away, something like that from selection show. Just curious, like, hey, you're going. I always love conference tournaments. It's fun to cover because you can just go there and like watch 9 hours of basketball.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. So outside of obviously, hey, you're going to be down there in Mizzou, Tennessee, and as far as Missouri goes, like, what are you looking forward to about this tournament? And, what do you think going into it? Like, I think we're going to get Alabama, Kentucky in the finals.
Yeah. So I think why I like March so much is because these games actually have stakes to them, right? Like everybody is playing for their season. And so I think that's what I'm most looking forward to, is that we're going to see the best version of like every single one of these teams, because they know that there's a lot on the line going into this tournament. So that's something that I'm really looking for. And then prediction wise, here's the thing, Gabe. Kentucky looks good. They look like Kentucky again. But Texas A&M showed that they can be really successful in a tournament setting, right?
I picked them to lose to Auburn.
Shouts to Matty Mock. I hope you get to have Dennis Gates tattooed on your body. But yeah, so I think that Texas A&M, they're going to be looking for revenge in this one. I think that they'll be really motivated to get back to that championship game and try to pull out the win this time. At the same time, Alabama looks like, like they have all year. They're a little bit more vulnerable now, but I don't know that anyone is good enough to beat them in this tournament. So that's the two teams that I would look at. I know I don't like going all chalk all the time, but for the SEC, that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I see 7 teams that could win this tournament.
7?
Yeah. I mean, you got Alabama, A&M, obviously.
Yeah.
Tennessee can win it. Kentucky can win it. I think Missouri can win it. And I think the Arkansas-Auburn winner could win it.
Yeah. The Arkansas, I know I've been talking up Nick Smith, and they haven't played well with them back, but I think he really is a good enough guy that can give you a spark, especially because most of these teams have not seen him in person before, right? They're only going off of what they've seen on film. So I think Arkansas could surprise Auburn, like you said. Auburn, the thing with me with Auburn is that they haven't won 2 games in a row since like mid-January. They are a pretty cold team coming into this. So they probably have the talent to do it. I just don't know if they have the execution to do it.
That's fair. Kyle wants to know how much of a difference it'll make that Tennessee has Josiah Jordan-James back in this game. I think everything they get from getting him back is counteracted by losing Zakai Ziegler. And like, if you were to tell me who is the team, not just in the SEC, who is the team in the country you would least want to play in your second game without your point guard, I might pick Missouri.
Yeah.
Because Ziegler is that guy, like, he can be a one-man press break, right? He's a good ball handler and all that. I don't know that Santiago Vescovi is that. I've seen him mishandle the ball enough and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
I can see a situation on Friday night where Missouri speeds Tennessee up and where we end that game going, well, of course Missouri won this game because Tennessee didn't have his point guard, and why didn't we think that was the case?
Yeah, and if you think back to that Tennessee game, like Zakai Ziegler was carving Mizzou up. He had 10 assists
second
that
half,
night.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that worries me about Tennessee is that was Mizzou's best shooting game of the season. They hit 53% of their threes. Nobody does that against Tennessee. They're the number 1 3-point defense in the nation. And so that's why that win came as such of a big surprise, not only because of the buzzer beater, but because Mizzou was actually hitting shots against Tennessee, and teams aren't supposed to do that. So the question going into Tennessee this time would be, can Mizzou keep that up, right? And how much of a difference is it going to be if the shots aren't going in as often as they were the first time around?
And like, I know we oversimplified this, but truly, Missouri can't win if it doesn't get to 70 in this game. I mean, if this game's in the 50s or 60s, they're beat. Now, as they showed in Knoxville, they could score 70 and lose, but they can't win without scoring 70.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so much of kind of what Blake said, like, if you're going to beat Tennessee, you have to speed them up. And to do that, you have to get a lead on them and make them play with some urgency. So if Mizzou isn't able to do that, and it's a tight one going down the stretch, I kind of lean more toward Tennessee just because I think that they're a little bit better equipped to handle that kind of slow-paced game.
All right, hang on. I just put up the wrong comment. I just put up a 2. I don't really know what that was regarding to. But okay, so last question, then we'll finish it up kind of with some final thoughts. I want you to take this first. Over under on the wins for the rest of the season. Like, theoretically, Missouri could have 2 games left, and it could have 9 games left. So you were setting the over under at what for wins the rest of the season?
Okay, I'm setting the line. I'll set it at, let me think. We'll set it at 3.5, I think.
Ooh. I would have set it at 1.5.
Okay, go on.
Only because, look, Missouri is going to be an underdog on Friday. Now, whether you think they should be or not, they are going to be. It's a program that hasn't won an NCAA tournament game in 13 years. They're going to be, I would think, seeded to win one, but even let's say if you lose either to Tennessee or in the first round of the NCAA tournament, then you've got to get 2 in the other tournament to get to that over under of 1.5.
Yeah.
If you give me 3.5, I'm going under. Absolutely.
All right, let me set it at 2.5 then.
Okay. 2.5. 2.5 makes me like, I'm not sure where I'm going there.
Yeah. Is it weird that I feel like Mizzou has a chance to go farther in the NCAA tournament than it does in the SEC tournament?
No, because theoretically, if depending on how things go, they're not playing a team quite as good as Alabama in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And also I think there's something to be said. I've heard some people say like that opposing coaches have said Missouri is as difficult to scout and prepare for as anybody in the country just because they do something nobody else does. So every team they could play this week has seen them and has often seen them twice.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you get into the NCAA tournament and you're playing Nevada in the first round and Texas in the second round, just for theoretic possibilities. They haven't seen you. They haven't seen anybody who does it quite this way. And your first game, you're going to be seeded to win. And that doesn't mean you're going to win, but you're going to be favored, right? Your second game, they've had about 24 hours to get ready for you.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a tough team to get ready. I mean, it's not like you just look out and go, yeah, they like to run high pick and roll. They got this guy down low. They're going to throw the ball. I mean, they just do something that not very many teams do.
Well, and on top of that, like realistically, that they're going to try to play through Kobe, but Kobe hasn't been the highest scorer on every given night, right?
Right.
Like Demoy Hodge has had big games. DeAndre Golston just dropped 20 on Ole Miss. So I think that also makes it difficult to prepare for them because not only do you have to weather the storm of ball pressure that they're going to send your way, but you also have to be ready for any of their guys to get hot on that night.
Yeah. All right. So we'll wrap this up with kind of a 2-part thing. I asked Blake, if you're on the committee, if they come to you and they say, let's just say, for sake of argument, Missouri beats Tennessee, loses to Bama. They come to you and say, all right, your responsibility is seeding Missouri. What's the number?
You asked me this last week. I still think they're at a 6, right? In strength of record, they are up to number 16. If you went just off of that, that would make them a 4 seed. And so if we're going to discount them because of the predictive analytics, Ken Palm and the computers and all that everybody wants to rage against now, I don't think that they should get docked another 16 spots because of it. I think that realistically, Mizzou has one of the strongest resumes out there. And so me personally, I lean more toward that than I do kind of what the analytics say.
Me personally, I would seed them as a 6. If they win the tournament, I would seed them as a 5. I don't think they're going to get a 6. I'll say this, and this is kind of where we're going to wrap up, is because I posted on the board yesterday a contest for our subscribers, like pick the seed, the region, and the opponent, and they'll win a gift card. You and me will win absolutely nothing. We will just win pride, being able to say we're right. I don't think Missouri's going to be a 6. I think they're going to be a 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to be in the East region. And I'll say, I don't know. You got to give me a seed in a region while I go look who that might be. Because I don't really have any idea off the top.
Okay. So region-wise, at least, I know the places that we're going to try to avoid. So I'll try to pick one that we want to go to. I'll say there'll be a 7 seed in Des Moines. Going okay, the region has to be like
right. The region is separate from what the location.
Yeah, true. Right. We'll say the East region, and then I'll say they go up against like a FAU kind of team, right? One of the better 9 seed or 10 seeds in the tournament.
Okay, so I think I'm going 7 seed East region. They play Pittsburgh in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And if they win that, they play Marquette. That's where I'm going to go.
Okay.
That's what I fall on. If I'm right, I'm just going to come on here and tell you all I was right for like.
Well, here's the thing, Gabe. I am very familiar with Shaka Smart's work. And so I don't necessarily think that they would play Marquette in the second round.
You don't think? I think Marquette can be a 2. Oh, you don't think Marquette would get to this?
Exactly.
I got you. Okay, so in that case, if they are not playing Marquette in the second round, they're playing Vermont for a bid.
There you go.
So excellent. All right. Well, Drew, want to let everybody know before you guys log off. Drew is headed to Nashville tomorrow. Mm-hmm. He will have complete coverage of Missouri and Nashville, however long that lasts. Like, he might be coming home Saturday morning. He might stay there for Selection Sunday and come home Monday morning. I'll start a live show shortly after every game Missouri plays this weekend. And after Drew does interviews, he'll join me. And then next Tuesday or Wednesday, we are either driving or flying somewhere. So say your prayers for Des Moines, Iowa, Drew. You've never wanted to go to Des Moines so bad.
Never have.
All right, man. We'll let you go and have a safe trip. And we will get plenty from you in Nashville this week.
Will do. Sounds good.
All right. I want to thank Blake Lovell for joining us and Drew King for hanging out as always. I want to thank all you guys for hanging out with us here on YouTube. A longer show this week. So if you are here with us on YouTube, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, do all the things that all the people that are better than me at YouTube tell you to do. If you are listening on the podcast, which will be up shortly after this, leave us a nice review, say good things about us, share it on social media, all of those things. Again, full basketball mode. Gerard Hamilton covering spring football, but Drew and I are following basketball for the next few days. March Madness, and Missouri's in it. So, we'll be there as long as they are. Want to remind you on the way out the door, PowerMizzou now has its own arm with the NIL collective, Every True Tiger Foundation. James Carlton wants to help out with that. He wants to help you, first of all, with your insurance. So if you've got insurance needs, home, life, auto, whatever, get in touch with James Carlton at carltoninsurance.net, 314-961-4800, the phone number, facebook.com/Carlton Insurance. But he also wants to help Mizzou's NIL efforts. So our subscribers, our viewers here, if you get in touch with James, you tell him you heard about him on PowerMizzou and you get a quote, he is going to donate $20 to the PowerMizzou Fund in the ETTF NIL collective. And that will help you guys get cool stuff like a chance to hang out with Mizzou athletes, Mizzou coaches, and maybe even see a Mizzou practice. So do that. Get in touch with James. Appreciate you guys watching. We're going to be back on Friday night after the Mizzou-Tennessee game. After that, I don't know, guys. Maybe Saturday, definitely Sunday, maybe next Thursday. We'll see. We'll be here a lot because it's March Madness. So here we go. Thanks for watching.